Alright, hi guys. Welcome to the last lecture of the course. I hope you've enjoyed the course. I've tried to make it interesting. I know it's summer. You guys would probably rather be doing anything else other than school. So I hope you've at least enjoyed it. You guys have been great. I mean, you've been really fun to work with. I've loved reading your test responses. You guys are very detailed. You know what you're doing. It's been a blast for me. I hope you've enjoyed the course. Before we get started today, I do need to remind you, go ahead and fill out your student surveys of instruction. I believe they're online through D2L. I should have a lot of the stuff auto-filled in. Just remember, if you like me, my name is Dr. Prince. If you don't, my name is anybody else. Alright, that joke doesn't really work as well when you're not doing the in-class paper, but I thought I'd try it. What I want to do today is, as this is the last lecture, kind of wrap things up. We're going to talk about Hurricane Katrina. I realize I did not put that with the Bush years as I should have. I do apologize for that. That was kind of an oversight from when I first designed these lectures a couple of years ago, and apparently I just now caught it. That's how on the ball I am. But after that, I want to talk about America in the modern era. So just more or less just some highlights of the Obama presidency, some of the problems facing the the United States, the United Nations as well, technically, issues of, foreign policy issues, some domestic issues, and then just a run up where that's all going to lead in November. This lecture should, asterisk, be shorter than most, but we'll see. I will try to not be too partisan. This is probably the most current eventsy thing that we'll talk about, but I mean, I'm just going to offer some of my comments, historical insights. If you don't like what I have to say, if it's opinion, that's fine. If it's fact, with Hurricane Katrina, why this was so impactful that I want you to have it as an ID term is this was one of the largest, in the top 5 in terms of most destructive hurricanes on record. This was probably the third most intense storm that made landfall. In terms of its cost, of 1,245 people dead, $108 billion in damage. This was probably the, costliest storm natural disaster in American history. I mean, this thing was huge. Okay? And when it made landfall, what we're going to see, as I realize I apostrophe S on Levy. Sorry for the grammar Nazis in the room. Sorry. What happens is the city, county, state, and federal governments were completely unprepared. I mean, when it makes landfall, it affects from Texas to Mississippi. But generally, when we think of Hurricane Katrina's damage, we tend to think of what happens with New Orleans, because New Orleans is probably the hardest hit individual city. And part of the reason is the levees, the historic anti-surge protection, the hurricane protection failed. And so 90% of the city floods. Just pure devastation. People are trapped without basic food or supplies. And so what all of this means, you have a number of people, trapped in the city. And the federal government was slow. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Authority, was slow to react. But also we see a failure of the local government. Ray Nagin, who was mayor of New Orleans, who is one of my least favorite characters. He's actually in prison now on corruption charges, but was the mayor of New Orleans, and, he could have ordered the city evacuated. But he waited 19 hours, which meant, by the time, the city is evacuated, most people are already trapped, have no way to get to that transportation. But most people are critical of George W. Bush. Now, Bush followed the guidelines of what he's supposed to do. Bush followed the legal procedure. But FEMA itself was really, really slow to get on the ball. And so the takeaway from this is, the government is not efficient. Yes, it's big. Yes, it shows, okay, hey, we can help you. We can care for you. We have all of these various government bureaucracies. But it's slow to act in almost any case. And so Katrina really shows the need for reform. This, by the way, would be would make landfall August 24, I believe, 2005. I posted a video that National Geographic kind of did as a day by day. But, I mean, this was just pure devastation. And the government from top to bottom bungled the response. And is that the fault of George W. Bush? No. Well, at least not individually. I think I read an article once that said, many strands of failure, but a lot of people to blame. No one person can or should take the credit, but a lot of people, screwed up. A lot of people bungled their jobs, and that's why this happens. Okay? So the government needs reform. The government is becoming bloated. You have all these bureaucracies, but they don't work well together. Okay? And that's part of why then in 2008, Barack Obama runs on the platform of hope and change. Change we can believe in. As I believe I mentioned, I'm not an Obama fan in the sense that I personally prefer John McCain. That being said, he was a far, in my opinion, better alternative to Hillary Clinton. And I'll admit, the man has done a lot of good stuff. A lot of bad stuff, a lot of good stuff. He's like any president. New boss. I firmly believe new boss, same as the old boss, okay? It's literally two sides of the same coin. With Barack Obama, okay, what we get is we see that resentment. And we kind of see what we see, today, that whole anti-establishment feeling. Well, in 2008, that had manifested as being against the status quo. John McCain, Sarah Palin, okay, these represented, to many people, just a continuation of the Bush administration. And okay, people were fine with it. After 4 years, after 8, people wanted a change. People liked the message of Barack Obama and Joe Biden. They likened him, okay, to a new Franklin Delano Roosevelt or a new John F. Kennedy. Okay? And why this is so important is a couple of things. One, we see the influence of media, just as with the election of 1976, okay, when the Saturday Night Live caricatures of Gerald Ford falling down helped to sway that election. I mean, Gerald Ford, to his dying day, said that Chevy Chase playing him cost him the election. So, too, Saturday Night Live has an impact here. Again, I can see Russia from my house. Sarah Palin never says that, but Tina Fey, as Sarah Palin, cements in the minds of Americans that Sarah Palin is a stupid idiot. Now, whether or not you think she is, that's a subject for another time, but it creates that popular perception. Americans don't want the status quo. They do want a change. And so we see that Barack Obama is elected by a large margin. The Democrats take the House. They take the Senate. For the first time in years, okay, they control the entirety of government. And theoretically, they could do a lot quickly. They don't, but they could do a lot quickly. And then obviously, and why I usually end this course with the election of 2008, though we're going to move a little further just to talk about some stuff. This is the first time an African American is elected president of the United States. And this is something that is absolutely amazing. Because at the beginning of this course, okay, had Barack Obama been voting age, it is highly unlikely he could have even voted, at least in the South. Okay? He could not go to school in a desegregated school in the South. Okay? But he is now president of the United States. And whatever you think of his politics, okay, that is a historic feat. And I'll say the same thing if Hillary gets it in 2016. I will say the same thing when I teach this course. I myself do not like Hillary Clinton. Honestly, I don't like Donald Trump either. So again, rock in a hard place. But if she gets elected, I'll be saying the same thing the next time I teach this course. The very fact that, at the beginning of this course, she could not, make equal pay. There was hardcore, a glass ceiling. The fact that she could, become president of the United States is nothing short of amazing. Americans also want a change in the status quo because they're having to deal with the Great Recession. And this comic that a lot of people at the time could relate to. Hey, Dad, can I move in with you until I find a job? Huh, that's funny. I just asked your grandparents the same question. I mean, this is the worst economic slump in American history since the Great Depression. In any other time, we would have called it a panic or a depression, but we've grown scared of those terms, so we call it the Great Recession. According to the Obama administration, it ends in June of 2009, but the after effects are felt long after. I mean, we're still dealing with some of the after effects. Definitely a few years ago we were. The economy at the time was sluggish and slow to grow. We've seen even today the unemployment rate drop, but a lot of why it drops is Americans are stopping looking for work. The unemployment rate only factors in those people actively looking for a job who cannot find one. And we see that economic forecasts, some do wildly better, but others have to continually be revised down because the economy is just slow to grow. This really affects people our age. I mean, I'm only in my 30s. A lot of you in your 20s, some are non-traditional. There's fewer higher paying jobs. Even those with college degrees, of which now there are more as more people go into college, have trouble finding work. For those of you that want to be historians and have chosen my way of life, and you realize that whole be a historian, we have cookies was a lie. We don't actually have cookies. For every job you will apply for, okay, if you want to work for a tenure track university, there will be at least 500 other applicants. I forget the exact number, but something like 20 to 40% of all newly minted PhDs do not find employment, okay, that year they graduate. So now you have that same number from your year plus that number from last year, applying for jobs, and it's a highly competitive job market. And that's just what I can relate to, but I mean, it's, there are jobs available, but let's be blunt. There's a reason why we now have to deal with the issue of minimum wage. And the fact that $7.25 an hour does not pay a living wage. We get the, problems of student loan debt. More, Americans today have student loan debt than in any time in history. College costs more. You go to OSU, you're well aware of that. As we get, more and more budget cuts, we have to, jack up tuition to make up the shortfall. We have a fairly high national debt. We've lost a lot of jobs in industry. At one time, unemployment tops 10%, so we're at 1970s levels. It seems pretty bad. We are moving forward. The Dow is higher now than it's ever been, so the stock market is doing great. Okay, we are seeing some recovery. More and more people are being able to find work. So it's not as bad now in 2016 as it was 7 years ago. That being said, some of the lasting stuff, the competition for jobs, the student loan debt, things like that stuff we're going to carry around for quite a while. And I'm not trying to say that I'm grumpy about my $70,000 in student loan debt, but I'm grumpy in my $70,000 in student loan debt. I'm just throwing that out there. As we're doing this, okay, combating both, the Great Recession and the War on Terror, we see an expanding American government. We see, the WikiLeaks scandal of 2010, okay, when Edward Assange, whatever, releases all of these diplomatic cables, where it comes out that the United States is spying not only on its own citizens, but largest part, we're reading the mail of foreign powers, even our allies, okay? This kind of hurts American credibility. But why are we doing it? Because after 9/11, we're just a little bit paranoid. I mean, we've spied on everybody for always. That's just what nations do. But now it's out in the open. And I do want to say, if listening to this, you think I'm trying to paint a bleak picture, I'm honestly not. The fact is, the world's always been the same. We're just more aware. Consider this. I want to say it's Mississippi. You can't have sororities. Why not? Well, because any house that contains 3 or more unmarried women must be termed a brothel. Well, brothels used to be out in the open. This whole going and paying for sex, prostitution, this wasn't something done at night, taboo, da-da-da. No, this was out in the open. We're just simply more aware of it now. You're going to have things like Edward Snowden, 2013, who released the information on the warrantless wiretapping, the activities of the NSA, and domestic American spying. For that, I'm going to post a video of John Oliver, who flew to Russia and interviewed Snowden about this. Snowden, by the way, has to flee the United States and is currently seeking asylum in Russia. Literally, the Cold War years, we've just flopped. Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? We have an increased lack of privacy. Okay, well, what do I mean by that? Well, one, what the government wants, the government information collects. Also, okay, Facebook. I remember, and I can't remember what was a couple of years ago, a school shooting or something, and within 30 minutes, news reports were like, well, here's what the shooter likes, here's the type of music he likes, here's his hobbies. Why? Because they can go to his Facebook page. How much does the government have to put out there versus how much are we willing to just put out there for anyone to find? Have you checked your privacy settings yet? I mean, come on, you might not know that much about me. You can hop on my Facebook page. You can see, some of my World War II rifle collection. My, profile picture is me shooting an old Swedish Mauser carbine from World War I. You can see my music and just all this stuff. We just put it all out there. It's like at the very moment we're screaming our heads off, we want privacy, we openly put all of this stuff on social media for anybody to see. And so the question then becomes, how much of that can be used with terrorism? How much is that making available to the government? How much is that just making available to anybody who wants it? I mean, this is also the rise of identity theft. Terrorism, continues, and so long as it does, you've got to have government agencies to fight it. So then it becomes, at the same moment you don't like domestic spying, you do like when it says, well, hey, the FBI just, news reports, well, the FBI just stopped a suspected terror plot and blah, blah, blah. Well, which do you want? That becomes the question. Government assistance. More and more people are on food stamps or need some sort of welfare help. Even though there is recovery, we are not self-sufficient as we were 50 years ago. Granted, there are more people, there's more people in the nation. There are more people, wanting jobs, and the jobs themselves are not as higher paying. So, this isn't a case of, well, thanks, Obama, but it's more a case of just realities. The more people you have, the more people in the workforce, okay, I can employ 2 people at $7 an hour or 1 at 14. That's the issue. We also see, with the passage of the Affordable Care Act, the ACA, you might know it as Obamacare, this now means that the American government now has a direct responsibility to its citizens' welfare. You must have health insurance, and the government is going to make sure you do. Now, if you don't, you're going to pay high tax penalties, which kind of sucks. But it now means that finally, the government is directly making sure that you are taken care of. And on the one hand, you might not like it. If you do, I'm not wanting to debate the politics, but I am saying from a historical significance, you almost think it's a well-duh that, well, shouldn't the government care about me? I'm paying taxes. Let me adjust my camera. I'm paying taxes in. I'm doing this stuff. Should not the government bear responsibility? Well, no. What is it? This is 2016. 140 years, sorry, I can do math. 140 years ago, 1876, the most direct interaction you had with the American government was that it delivered your mail. Then 1930s, okay, well, when you're old, we have to take care of you. Now the government is saying we need to take care of all of our citizens. Like it or not, think it could be improved or not, but it signals a trend of expanding government. And the more the government expands, or to use the quote from Civilization 5, as the bureaucracy is expanding to meet the needs of the expanding bureaucracy, we see a shift, a backlash in politics. We get the taxed enough already movement, or you might know it as the Tea Party, where I love this picture on the left because apparently Dr. Oken from Independence Day and Captain America are in the same universe. And Obama is apparently a communist. But with the Tea Party movement, this was a grassroots movement within the Republican Party. And, it's kind of kicked off by Ron Paul in 2007, who was like, look, I don't like what the government's doing. They're taxing us too much. He then goes the more libertarian route. But this, which, just spreads like wildfire in 2009, becomes politically active the next year. Initially, they don't like taxes, they don't like deficit spending, which you kind of have to have if you don't have taxes, details, and also more, this is kind of a surge of a new right, in the sense they, guys like Ted Cruz, whose political career is more or less launched in 2012, is part of that Tea Party movement. They're increasingly conservative. They, more to the right. They want more religion and politics. They want smaller government, things like this. They want to repeal Obamacare. They want to fix the economic issues. They want to clamp down on illegal immigration. And at the time, this creates a rift with the Republican Party. It's because of these guys that the Republicans do get control of the House again, but we see a clear rift between the Tea Party and the establishment. But these guys are way right of center. So much so, if they cannot defund Planned Parenthood over abortion, or they cannot get parts of Obamacare repealed, they had no problem shutting down the American government. And what does a government shutdown mean? That simply means that if the American government does not have enough money, and bear in mind this kind of goes in with that whole taxation thing, enough money to pay for itself, it has to go into sequestration. It has to shut itself down. But shutting itself down actually costs more money than if you had funded it in the first place. So before, if you're a Tea Party Republican, that's fine. Again, as long as you're politically active and have, thoughts, feelings, as long as it doesn't go to not National Socialism, I don't care. But, here's the but. The same people who said, well, we don't have enough money in the government, so we need to cut spending, spent more in shutting down the government. Just saying, these are still politicians. These are still guys that are self-serving. Throw the bums out, that's what I say. The one really big shift we can see, and again, this kind of ties in with, if we harken back to the Stonewall riots, the decriminalization of homosexuality, is we can see a shift in gay rights in the United States. Remember, when we started this course, if you were homosexual, you could be thrown in jail. In the case of Alan Turing, you could be chemically castrated. Hollywood, all but, well, not Hollywood necessarily, but Hollywood films all but accused you of being a pedophile. And, once we get to the 1980s, although it's no longer criminalized, you would be scared for your life about catching AIDS. On top of that, then we get what's called the Defense of Marriage Act. And this is a Republican bill signed into law by Bill Clinton. And what DOMA is DOMA, this is 1996, defines marriage. And the whole point was to define marriage as, one man, one woman. The idea, remember, with anything, if you have it as a law, not a Supreme Court decision, but as a law, a constitutional law, then it's legal. In this case, the law more or less said, look, if you were to refuse or not support gay marriage, you were not violating civil rights. Similarly, we're going to get things like 1993, President Clinton by executive order, don't ask, don't tell. This was military policy that said, okay, if you are gay, all right, you don't tell anybody. If you're not gay, you do not ask if they are gay. The whole point is keep it in the shadows. Nobody knows for sure. Again, even as late as 20 years ago, this is still, to be gay was, how can I best put this? You were not fully accepted socially. And you could even make the argument you're not today, but it was much worse 20 years ago. Okay. In the 90s and 2000s, you start to see the rise of civil unions, and then finally we make a change. 2011, okay, mostly supported by military. I think the Marines didn't like it, I want to say. I could be wrong on that. But Don't Ask, Don't Tell was overturned. Ooh, you know what, the Marines, I could be thinking letting women serve in combat roles. That I know they oppose. That's what I'm probably thinking. President Obama ends Don't Ask, Don't Tell. In 2013, United States v. Windsor, DOMA is overturned. And more or less it says simply this. If you get a civil union, all right, it's separate but equal. It's the same language as Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka way back in 1954. If I have a marriage and you and your spouse have a civil union, we're separate, but are we really equal? And the answer would be no, because I get tax breaks and you don't. And, people ask me, well, what's my stance on gay marriage? My attitude is, I have two minds about it, and this is where I will get political. On number one, if you want to make the same mistake as I did and get married, it serves you right, and I'm not going to feel a damn bit sorry for you. I'm just saying I will never do that again in my life. And number two, if, to be equal and get a tax break, okay, we need to make them all marriages, I would much rather keep my tax break. I don't care what you do. If I get to keep my tax break, knock yourself out. Again, you want to make the same mistake I did, serves you right. Learn from me, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. I love my wife, even if, she... Anyways. Well, this comes to a head in 2015 in Obergefell v. Hodges. And with Obergefell v. Hodges, okay, we see finally for the first time this becomes accepted. As early as 2003, some states begin to recognize same-sex marriages. Then there's a ban in California, which a federal court overturned. Now, President Obama had said he was against gay marriage, but then later said his position was evolving and supported it. And this was in 2012. And then last year, June 26, 2015, the Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage is protected by the Constitution. How? The Equal Protection Clause. Simply this. If, I can get married, you can get married. If Massachusetts recognizes marriage, okay, and then equal protection laws, if you get married in Massachusetts, come to Oklahoma, okay, Oklahoma has to recognize that marriage. So if Oklahoma has to recognize that marriage, why then can't a couple in Oklahoma get married? Okay, and that's basically how it works. And so gay marriage is, technically legal in all 50 states. And again, just look at how far we've come. And I don't even mean since 1945. I mean since 1969 with the Stonewall riots. Again, we've gone from, with the Stonewall, the cops going into the Stonewall Inn. If you're a cross-dresser, you're arrested. That's 1969. Okay. What? 46 years later. Yes. 47 years later. There we go. I'll get there in the end. Okay, so I got a math. I'm going to tell a story that I got a master for. 47 years later, we're having a debate. Well, can a cross-dresser use the well, not even a cross-dresser, but transgender use the bathroom of the sex they identify with? That is a huge leap. Human beings don't do anything quickly, and that is a huge, huge leap. So, that being said, how far do we still have to go? As part of the Republican Party platform in 2016, they want a constitutional amendment to overturn Obergefell v. Hodges. They want a constitutional amendment that says that same-sex marriage is not legal in the United States of America. So even though there is progress, okay, progress must be defended. And that's something, it doesn't really matter what party you're from. If there's something you want, you always have to defend it. Because our laws are always in a state of flux. You want a gun ban? Well, other people can overturn it. You secure rights to concealed carry. Other people might try to legislate it. You want to ban booze? Other people can get that amendment repealed. Okay? So even, we've made progress, but now you've got to defend that progress. Okay, now for my joke. Oh, it's from a Cyanide and Happiness cartoon. And it's really how historians do marriage. Okay. So, a guy is talking to his girlfriend and says, honey, wait a minute. I'm trying to do math and I'm trying to figure something out here. Okay? If we've only been dating for 4 months, and you're 6 months pregnant, and you sold me some apples, and I hopped on a train going west at 53 miles an hour, then where the hell are my apples? That's kind of what doing math for a historian is like. We get tongue-tied confused. That literally, you don't know this, but after your senior thesis, we actually have to scoop out that part of your brain so that you can't do math. You only think I'm kidding. I might be, I might not, I don't know. So domestically, we're making progress. But politics are just as divisive. These issues, I mean, come on, we're still fighting over abortion. Roe v. Wade, 1973, we're still, I think the GOP wants an amendment on that, severely regulating abortion, It's the same issues we've talked about through the course, a lot of them, they're still going on even to this day. Foreign policy. However, the world is becoming a little bit more unstable. One of the highlights of the Cold War is simply this, that the United States and the Soviet Union, in part by wanting to maintain a status quo, exercised control over the world. In the sense, we don't want anything that could threaten world peace, we don't want anything popping out, so we're going to try to control the status quo. That goes away after 1991. So we get things like Arab Spring. Okay, this is in Egypt, when a lot of the Middle Eastern nations and North African nations overthrew their, more theocratic, hardline rulers. So you get Arab Spring. Here, Operation Odyssey Dawn in 2011, when a coalition of, some American ships, but, Britain, France, Canada, and Italy, provided offshore naval support for Libyan rebels trying to overthrow Muammar Gaddafi. Okay? We see a rise of foreign interventions. Now, it's different than the Bush years. Afghanistan and Iraq proved that really unilateralism does not work. So now we try to build coalitions. But we're just still going into numerous nations. We'll do Tunisia, Libya. Once the Syrian civil war breaks out, we'll, have some stuff in Syria. We rely a lot on drone warfare, flying predator drones. And, if we think there are terrorist hotspots, rather than boots on the ground, we will just fire some Hellfire missiles into the midst of them. And, this is probably one of the major criticisms of the Obama administration. He has really embraced this type of warfare. The problem is, if you have bad intelligence, and I'm just thinking Team America, bad intelligence. If you have bad intelligence, this can lead to a number of civilian deaths. There's been a couple things at times, we've thought it was a terrorist meeting and we've fired Hellfire missiles into a wedding party. This is, it's not unlike Vietnam, fighting war on the cheap. We don't want boots on the ground. We hope we can win it through air power. It didn't work then. It's not working now. We see the issue of nuclear proliferation. North Korea has exploded, we believe, nuclear weapons. That or they were really, 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 really big conventional bombs, most likely nuclear weapons. They're developing submarine-launched ballistic missile capability. Iran wants enriched uranium. Granted, they say it's for peaceful purposes. They say it is for usage in nuclear power plants, but still, we don't fully know. And so we've taken what steps we can, peaceful steps, to try to ensure that that does not turn into a weapons program. Now, our politics are divided about this, and so what we see is many times people that would be for intervention don't like it. Why? Well, now with the Tea Partiers, it either costs too much, or if Obama wants it, they have to be against it. There's also other people who would traditionally not be for it that are for it because Obama wants it, or they're still against it. And so politics are divided. And now we have to deal with ISIS, which we'll come back to. But I'll post the link, but Obama once referred to ISIS as, and probably this would go down, I would say, as just something almost as unfortunate as Bush and his mission accomplished speech. But he said that ISIS was the JV team of Al-Qaeda, the junior varsity team. And now ISIS is the number one threat to the United States in the modern world. Actually, I would argue threat to the world in the modern world. While we're dealing with this, despite what was probably one of Obama's best one-liners in the 2012 presidential debates, when Mitt Romney warned of, Russian aggression, Russian expansionism, and Obama said, well, the 1980s cold and they want their, the Cold War cold and wants its foreign policy back. The fact is Russia is expanding. And we see in 2014, the annexation of the Crimea from the Ukraine. And why this is a problem, it's creating new distrust with Russia. We are bound to protect by treaty Ukrainian sovereignty. Remember that treaty I mentioned a few lectures back where we said, okay, Ukraine, if you give up your nuclear warheads, as part of becoming your own not USSR country, give them back to Russia, we will guarantee your territorial integrity. Now there's that issue of if Russia goes, we have to honor our treaty obligations. Now, at the this is somewhat cooled off since then, but some of the stuff, it's still there. Late 2014, Russia begins flying bombers in the Caribbean. They fly them all through international waters. Here's an F-22 intercepting a Tupolev Tu-95 Bear off of California, 50 miles off the coast of California. Britain, Norway, I've seen stuff of even Portugal, scrambling fighters to intercept Russian bombers, as they're just feeling their mind. Well, what do we care about this bomber? Simple. This bomber can deliver nuclear weapons. I mean, this is how they would do it old school before the ICBM really took hold. Now, is that why they're doing it to test our stuff? I don't know. But I would say it's probably just the, flexing of the muscles. With our rhetoric, Mikhail Gorbachev, who comes to Ronald Reagan's funeral in 2004, 10 years later, November 2014, accused the United States of wanting a new Cold War, that we're trumping up stuff against Russia. Are we? Well, maybe, but when you have a guy like Vladimir Putin, who, he looks good shirtless, but, he is a scheming SOB, you just don't know. We also can see things like Russian hackers. If you've heard of the WikiLeaks release of the emails from the Democratic National Convention this year, 2016, that implicated that, they were setting it up from the start so that Hillary would get it and that Sanders wouldn't have a chance, they blamed Russian hackers. They said Russian hackers broke into this and gave the information. They're trying to get a Donald Trump presidency. But at the same time, these are the same people that said, well, Hillary Clinton stored her emails on an unsecured server as Secretary of State. We're positive Russian hackers never got a hold of them then. Just saying, if they can do one, they can do the other. We're also, if we're going to do that, we're in, cyber issue of, cyber hacking, cyber terrorism with China. Okay? I mean, again, it's not as deadly a game, but it's still a game of chess. But the one area where things have really gotten hot is the rise of ISIS, the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, which is also known as ISIL, the Iraq State, or the Islamic State in the Levant, or by the name Daesh. Now, this has been a terror group that formed roughly about 1999, worked with Al-Qaeda since 2004. But Al-Qaeda found these guys even too radical. These guys wanted something more. They didn't want the liberation or, the de-Westernization. They want a worldwide Islamic caliphate, which they will, enact June 2014. And this is right around the time, this is actually within a few days after, because they are able to, do enough damage to the Iraqi army. They're able to control enough territory in both Iraq and Syria that June 2014, 3 years after we left, American troops have to go back to Iraq. They have to go back to try to kick out ISIS. And again, the U.S. were slow to grasp the threat. I mean, we want to say that we're winning the war on terror. We tend to have this thing, well, here's the top Al-Qaeda leader. I used to have a friend, and I felt bad for her because she wanted to take an interest in politics and world events, but she just wasn't there. And every time, we'd announce, all right, we've killed the top stuff, she'd always post on Facebook, yay, the war is almost over, Al-Ghazi be home soon. Never quite understanding, just because you get the top guy doesn't mean there aren't 10 to take its place. I just realized I should hail Hydra right now, but I'm not Captain America, but it's the same basic thing. This is going to be a long, drawn-out process. And so the issue then with that is, what does it say of world stability? Terror attacks are now fairly common. I mean, a couple of weeks ago, Bastille Day in Nice, France, when the guy runs the truck into the parade. What about, the various attacks in Paris, or Je suis Charlie, or, the Munich shooter, or the guy that blew himself up in Ansbach, or the guy who pledged loyalty to ISIS when he shot up the Orlando nightclub, or the, couple in San Bernardino earlier this year. Terrorism is now a common thing, and it's not as deadly as 9/11, but we are definitely more aware of it. There's the issue of, Russian military buildup. They're still flying bombers. It's not like we aren't, but they're still flying bombers or, sending fighters to intercept our stuff. It's not Cold War level, but they are very clearly flexing their muscles. You have the issue of Brexit, the United Kingdom, leaving the European Union, tanking, the European economy. It's just a question of world stability. Think of the Turkish coup, okay? The Turkish army sees itself as the guardian of democracy, but the coup failed, and so now it's the question of who's the good guy, who's the bad guy. You still have economic issues. We are seeing worldwide recovery, but the issue is it's not fully stable, and especially with stuff, terrorism, Russia, Brexit, all this stuff, it's still, any one thing could send back to another recession. And then on top of all of that, we have a fairly volatile presidential election. And this one, I think, shows just the dysfunctionality of American politics. We've gone from, the days of Truman and, when everybody could realize that McCarthy was a hack and, stand up to him after a few years, okay? Where you could, where you could theoretically disagree with someone over politics and have a beer with them later. Now it's, common to call Trump a fascist, call, Hillary Clinton, all of this stuff. There's no real political unity in the Republican Party. There's the never Trump thing. For whatever reason, Ted Cruz speaks at the convention, doesn't endorse Trump. Why he was invited is beyond me. There's people that don't like that. Or the fact that, all the Bernie supporters, Bernie Sanders doesn't get the nomination. And you've got Sarah Silverman invited to speak, and she's like, you Bernie or bust people, you're ridiculous. If you don't support the establishment, there's something wrong with you. And along with that, we see an attempt by Bernie, and this is why I liked him, because it was a political revolution. It was an attempt to do something different from the establishment. And, widespread support. I cannot tell you how many of my Democrat friends were pro-Bernie. You just wonder how Clinton still gets elected. And then with this WikiLeaks scandal, you find out the system was, I won't go so far as to say it was rigged, but the establishment was sure going to do everything they could to make sure he wouldn't get elected. And so with that, if we look, literally Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are the two most unpopular presidential candidates in pretty much American history. Yet they are our two main choices. Okay, you've got Gary Johnson, you've got Jill Stein, but still, what does it say about our politics when we're like, well, I'll be blunt. My poli-sci course last year had a student. Well, I think Donald Trump's a douche. All right, I know where this is going. But I think we need a douche to be president and shake things up a little bit. What? You admit the person is unlikable, you admit you don't like them, you admit whatever, and you're going to vote for them. So where do we go from here? Honestly, I'm not going to engage in counterfactual hypothesis. I'm in the business of history, not the future, but I'll say this. No matter what you think of these people, and I purposely tried to find the goofiest pictures I could. That, and I'm not going to lie, I just love the picture of Clinton and Trump. The country will survive. There's no need to be, well, I'm going to Canada, if whoever gets elected. The country will survive. We have proven that. We are strong and resolute. Yes, we are in troubled times, but if you took anything from this course, look at 1968. We can overcome troubled times. We can rebuild. We have the ability to come together as a nation. We just have to want to, and we just have to be willing to put aside our differences. Can we do it? Yes. Have we done it? Yes. And it too will happen again. All right, you guys have been a lot of fun. I really, really, really hope you've enjoyed the course. Fill out those things. If there's things you liked, I'd love to know. If there's things you didn't like, I'll begrudgingly want to know. I hope I was able to make it interesting. I would love to see you in future courses. Typically at the upper division level, I teach history of the Second World War. I teach Cold War. I do other courses like that. I'll probably soon take over, maybe teaching American military history from Dr. Moses one of these days. So, I'd love to see you again in a future course. If there's anything I can do for you, you want to keep in touch on Facebook after, you want, you need a letter of recommendation for a scholarship, whatever, I would be more than happy to do that. Whatever I can do for you, just let me know. Have a great rest of your summer, all 2 weeks of it, if you're not taking an intersession course. I hope you have a good 2016-2017 school year. Remember to do the final exam if you're missing, and get the book review in if you haven't done so already. If there's anything that you have outstanding or that I misgraded or something, let me know ASAP. Okay, your final exam, I'm going to need those by Saturday. I don't know when final grades are due. I presume it's Tuesday, so I'm going to, if you need to turn it in late, let me know. But I'm going to probably need a good reason. I'm probably going to have it for sure in my hand no later than Monday. All right, you guys have been a blast. Take it easy. Have a good rest of the summer. Good luck with the coming school year. I really hope you enjoyed the course. I tried to make it interesting. I'll admit this isn't fully my specialty, but I think it's a fun course to teach. Hope you like the videos, and, I won't see you in the next video, but hopefully I'll see you around campus on Facebook or in another class someday. Take it easy, guys. Bye-bye.